Hey guys, so thanks for joining us tonight. Hopefully, you guys can make it and jump in live. If not, this recording is going to be for you. We got a couple questions prior to the live tonight that we're going to try and answer regarding explosive behaviors, right? Explosive behaviors, kind of like the hardest ones to deal with, right? Sometimes we have kids that kind of curl up almost into themselves. Sometimes we have kids that try to tear our house up, which is always so hard, right? Especially if you're out in public, you are always concerned. Are people going to understand, right, what's happening? Do they know, like, maybe to stay away and let you handle it? Or you really are going to need help, right, in order to not only maintain your safety, but the safety of your child? So, again, if you're joining us live tonight, I really am excited to answer your questions, but we're going to jump in and start with a couple of the questions that came in from our members prior to this meeting tonight. So the first one is, this is a situation, right? The mom, she was at a grocery store and the child started to take very large quantities, right, of food off the shelf, breaking some, destroying some, causing, significant monetary damage, right, in the process, in a very short period of time. The child's young, they're 6 years old. So it's not like an older child that automatically, criminal charges usually start to become just an automatic. This is a young child, right? It's more severe autism. And the mom was like, what do I do? Right? What do I do? One, I need to take care of my child, but two, I also need to make sure that as, just a human in society, I'm repairing those damages, whether it's I have to pay for it, I have to make an insurance claim, things like that. So, kind of let's dive into this question, right? So, when you have that young child, oftentimes it is good to ask for help from people. It could be, other store employees, it could be other people right in the store. Maybe they're willing to kind of bar the carts right in the aisle to kind of like keep a small space, right? To keep your child from either creating more damage, getting out, things like that, till you can kind of get a hold of them, right? And very securely get out of the store. Another thing I do with my own kid, and it was suggested to me by our child psychiatrist, is to have a letter on hand. I keep it in the diaper bag, along kind of like laminated in a bag with PRN medication. So if that's something you also have access to, that's another big piece. In the letter, it says what you should do if you are a bystander and how you can help, right? It could be, accessing those visual cues that are in the bag, the PEC system, the AAC device. Maybe they got chucked halfway down the aisle, stuff like that. Maybe medication that you're going to need. They're able to like open up the bottle and give you the dosage. So I think having like your safety plan spelled out in a very simplistic way. And if you just say, there's a note in my diaper bag, it's in, and I put red tape on the bag that it's in. So it's easy to kind of identify what bag in the diaper bag it is, right? Because you're always digging in the diaper bag trying to find what you need. So having that easily identifiable really helps those bystanders, one, know what to do, because maybe you don't want them to get close to your child or close to you. You just need help getting those items, right? But a lot of times people want to help, right? Parents are so ashamed of like, or asking for help, or that they're going to get chastised or whatever. Most people genuinely, most of the time, want to help in a meaningful way. So giving them those directions, right? You don't have to explain anything. They just have to read the letter. And if they can't read, a store clerk or somebody else will be able to help read that letter and support you in that process. So I also think having your contact information on that paper is important, right? So say your child has destroyed property, tell the store, please take a picture of this letter. It has my information. I need to get my child safely, home to de-escalate. This is my information. If you need to call the police and make a report, or I need to make an insurance claim, things like that, I'm happy to do so once I'm able to, get my child under control. But that way, you're not just leaving the store as some random person that they'll never be able to get a hold of, right? Which often kind of releases a lot of tension in the kind of area, and provides the store with one security that they can track you down to kind of repair damages, which is fair, right? And also give you that kind of safety and security to hopefully be able to get your child home and regulated. And even if the police have to meet you at your home in order to deal with the situation, that's okay, right? Again, you want the right thing for your child and for the store. So again, just trying to make both parties okay. So that was question number one: what to do with a smaller child in a store that has caused significant damage, right? Our other question that came in again was regarding eloping in public places. That is so hard, right? Because you have often traffic. At home, we have so many things really locked down, right? They are very, very, very secure. We are super cognizant of kind of where the loopholes are and things like that. When we go out in public, there's parks. Even if it has a fence, people leave the gate open. Kids climb over stuff if they're in a panic. There's a lot of traffic and tons of people that don't know how to interact with your child. So when we're talking about eloping, right? What do you do? How do you keep your cool in that moment as well? Because it's terrifying, right? When your child leaves an area and basically runs into some very, very unsafe situations very quickly or immediately. So as a parent, you kind of have to go into that survival mode, right? You have to start thinking rationally and not emotionally, which is so hard to say and to do. I think it's something to practice, right? When we think stop, drop, and roll, right? That's something we know. Stop, drop, and roll. Literally, you have done it so many times that it's not a big deal, but you only stop, drop, and roll when you're on fire. But because we have practiced in our mind all of these things so frequently, we can actually put into play the strategies that are going to work. So often I tell parents, practice these drills. Practice if your child is going to elope, what will you do? If your child starts destroying things, what will you do? Again, treat it like a drill. So when it does happen, it becomes automatic rather than emotional fight, flight for both parties. So again, that's my kind of nugget of information is you have to treat it like a drill. So practicing what your child will do. If they are a serial eloper, again, if you're going to be out in public, I always say, have one of those either safety vests on your child, a shirt that says, disabled or autistic, to kind of label them, maybe with your phone number, things like that on the shirt. So if they are running, they are loose, your information is on there, or information to let the public know that this is a dangerous situation, right? A child that has a safety vest on that is running towards the street, people, not only will they notice it, but they'll really take notice, right? Because that in itself is definitely strange. So having your child prepared, right, with extra safety precautions is great. Using GPS trackers is another great option if you can keep one on your kid. We say if, because I've had kids who didn't like them, or it was really hard to hide them in shoes. They can honestly tell the difference between one with a shoe with a tracker or not a tracker. There's Angel Sense. It's a good device. It's a really heavy device. So it's hard sometimes to get kids to wear those. Keeping a backpack on with a tracker is also difficult. But if your child can tolerate a tracker's a great tool. They sell pretty cheap trackers now on Amazon that are pretty effective. So I always encourage grab one of those GPS trackers and put it on your kid if they will tolerate that. So another question that got sent in by our listeners is verbal raging, right? Verbal raging is kind of another form of explosive behavior. We kind of covered two behaviors that are more physical in nature with eloping and kind of property destruction. But we do have those wonderful kids who often aren't destroying property. They're often not running. They're often just running, right, verbally at us, at people in the community, strangers, things like that. So those verbal ragers, how do we handle verbal raging, right? And that's a tough one, right? That is often very, very difficult because one, they're verbally being antagonistic, right? And when you're antagonistic and you have those capabilities, people sometimes don't give as much grace and empathy, right? Because they feel like, well, if you can say F you, this, that, or the other thing, then you have the ability to not do that as well, right? That it's potentially a choice. When often it is related to their disability, they're often in fight or flight mode. And how can we get out of this and repair our situation? Some of our verbal ragers are also nonverbal. They're making a ton of noise. They're trying to get their point across. They're often overstimulated. And we need to work on getting them back to grounded or figuring out what it is that they need, right? They could be in extreme pain, all of these other things. It's sometimes really, really hard to pinpoint, right? One of those big key pieces, again, is to be extremely calm, maintain your cool. Again, you are going to practice this like a drill, right? You're going to practice these strategies when they're asleep with your husband, make up crazy situations with each other, and practice them. Often, verbal ragers, I feel, do really well with extreme redirection, humor, things like that. Often, if they are really into, say, a particular topic like unicorns or fire trucks, saying a random thing like, oh my gosh, did you see that? Did you see that fire truck go by? It had a unicorn in it. And you get half a second to kind of get your foot in the door. And often those couple kind of extreme statements will stop the verbal raging long enough for you to start the de-escalation process, right? It will stop the brain long enough to give you that half a second to start to turn the corner. Will it stop it entirely? Generally not, right? But it generally gives you enough to make that right or left-hand turn out of the situation. So having kind of those extreme statements or humor or things like that to really change the dynamics of the situation are huge. They're very, very important. If those are strategies that are not effective with your verbal rager, sometimes that will, just up the ante. Like, why are you making crazy things? You're making me feel like even more crazy than what I already am. Having that list of de-escalation pieces is huge. It really is. Having maybe a PRN medication available, also talking to your doctor about those options really is important. Having the time and the patience to get through these situations. And sometimes, like for example, my son, he does better with talking to his dad when he really becomes heightened and agitated. And you have to have that person to call, put them on the phone to help you kind of walk through that de escalation process. Or even having a recording of that person. You never know. Sometimes you can't get people on the phone. Sometimes having a recording of things to help walk that person through, right? They can make a generic, like, hey, buddy, I know it's rough. I know you're screaming. I know you're upset. I know this is a lot. When I see you later, right, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Or I know this is hard, but we have to like try and work through it with your mom, your grandma, your aunt, your uncle, whoever it is that they might be with frequently. So having a recording or having another person sometimes also really is very helpful. I hope these couple tips kind of help you with explosive behaviors. If you have more questions or want more answers, please send me a message. We'll address it in our next live. Thanks so much and have a great night.